Our relationships change the course of our lives, but can they change history? I'm the Affair Archivist, and today we will learn the little-known story behind Frank Sinatra's 1938 arrest, the forgotten scandal that put him behind bars for seduction. Please note, this essay is based on research conducted mainly from two different sources, James Kaplan's biography, Frank the Voice, and Kitty Kelley's biography, His Way, the unauthorized biography of Frank Sinatra, and do not reflect the views or opinions of this channel. Also note, there is a discussion of abortion and miscarriage in this video. Around midnight on November 27, 1938, 22-year-old Frank Sinatra had just finished a performance of Night and Day at the Rustic Cabin in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. As he took in the audience's applause, police suddenly appeared and hauled him off the stage. He was arrested and taken to the Bergen County Sheriff's Office in Hackensack and charged with seduction, resulting in the now iconic mugshot that exhibits Sinatra in the height of his youth, just before his career skyrocketed. Seduction may sound like a ridiculous reason to throw someone in jail today, but it had a long legal history in the United States, and Frank was unfortunate enough to be arrested for this crime just as it was being removed from the law in various states across the country. His two-timing ways had caught up with him. The arrest came about as a result of a love triangle between himself, his eventual wife Nancy, and a young woman named Toni. While his picture is now in the Celebrity Mugshot Hall of Fame, the titillating story behind his arrest is not well known, but no less fascinating. When Frank Sinatra initially auditioned for a position as a singing waiter at the Rustic Cabin, he didn't get the job. The manager didn't like him. He was cocky, and his voice was nothing to write home about. Frank returned to Hoboken dejected. He took his dog upstairs to his room and sobbed. His mother, Dolly, heard him crying and was determined to take action. Dolly Sinatra, had she lived in the 21st century, would perhaps be referred to as a helicopter parent. Frank was her only son, and they both nearly died when he was born on December 12, 1915. She was in labor for hours, and the doctor was called. Frank was brought into the world with forceps, which left scars on his face and disfigured his ear. The baby, weighing 13.5 pounds, was blue. The doctor assumed he was dead, put him aside, and focused on saving Dolly's life. Were it not for Frank's grandmother, who picked him up and revived him, it is likely he would not have made it. Frank was resentful that the doctor did not make an effort to save his life for a very long time afterwards. Dolly Sinatra and her husband, Marty, were polar opposites. One of the only things they had in common is that they were both immigrants. Dolly was born in Genoa, and Marty was Sicilian. They arrived in America as children. Though his arms were covered in tattoos to seem like a tough guy, Marty Sinatra was anything but. He lived under the thumb of his wife. Dolly was powerful, opinionated, and took the bull by the horns. Marty was reserved, awkward, and had a receding hairline. He was a former boxer, sometimes employed as a chauffeur. Frank later said, "All I'd hear from my father was a grunt. He'd just say, eh, eh." Frank had very different feelings towards his mother. "She was a pisser. She scared the shit out of me. Never knew what she'd hate that I'd do." Adhering to the strict parenting codes of the time, Dolly would often beat Frank with a club, then hug him when she was done. She once threw him down the stairs and knocked him unconscious. Frank's life outside of the home was also difficult. The neighborhood kids did not like him. He was bullied for his sensitive nature, his clothes, and his small size. The kids called him Scarface because of the scars he received as a baby. When he tried to buy his way into friendships with money or gifts, it only made things worse. He grew up in Hoboken's Little Italy, which was full of crime and gangs, but young Sinatra was not accepted into these circles. Dolly was a woman ahead of her times. She worked several jobs to provide for her family. They moved from Little Italy into a middle-class Irish neighborhood in the mid-1920s. She was well connected in Hoboken. She helped newly arrived Italian immigrants find work and housing. Additionally, she worked as a midwife and often gave women abortions, sparing them disownment. She also had ties with the politicians that ran Hoboken, connections that she used to her benefit when necessary. The Sinatras moved to a $13,000 home on Garden Street, an even more affluent area, in 1931. During the Depression, $13,000 was considered a fortune. Dolly and Marty hoped their son would become a doctor or an engineer, However, it was clear from an early age that the traditional path was not for Frank. He struggled to find his place in the world, dropping out of school at 16 and not doing much afterwards. Dolly got him a job delivering newspapers, and on a whim, Frank decided he wanted to be a sports columnist. When Dolly learned that the sports writer for one of Hoboken's papers was killed in a car accident, she told Frank to go to the office to ask for the job. Frank showed up and skipped the interview. He simply sat at the dead journalist's desk and fiddled with his office supplies. He didn't get much writing done before he was fired. He worked several manual labor jobs in the meantime, alienating his coworkers with his fancy taste in clothing and arrogant attitude. Despite this listlessness, Sinatra finally found his passion when he heard Bing Crosby's voice on the radio. Crosby revolutionized music and American culture in the 1920s with his laid-back, natural approach to singing, which was inspired by black artists. Young Sinatra finally mustered up the motivation to pursue a career in the music industry and asked to sing anywhere he could, often for free or just a few dollars. He performed at weddings, political rallies, dance halls, social clubs, anywhere that would have him. He often helped bands with their equipment in exchange for stage time. His tenacity eventually paid off. In the summer of 1934, Frank was on vacation with his aunt in Long Branch, New Jersey, and met 17-year-old Nancy Barbato. They immediately connected. He serenaded her with a ukulele. Nancy lived in Jersey City and was from a large family, in contrast to Frank. Her father was a contractor who built a business from nothing, and the Barbatos were even more well off than the Sinatras. This, of course, appealed to Dolly. However, Nancy's father was not impressed with Frank. Though Nancy was supportive of Frank's singing career, her father insisted that he get a real job. Frank began working as a plasterer's assistant in Jersey City for Nancy's father in an effort to prove his devotion to her. However, he only lasted 2 weeks before he overslept one day and decided to stop showing up for work. After that, he and Nancy had to meet in secret, either in his car or at the Sinatra home, as her father forbade her from seeing him. Still, they continued dating for several years. Frank received the first big break in his budding music career in 1935. He joined a quartet called the Four Flashes, later renamed the Hoboken Four. The group won a radio contest called Original Amateur Hour. This program helped many artists in the area launch their careers. After winning, they set out on a nationwide tour. While it seemed as though his big moment was upon him, things did not work out the way he expected. Sinatra's other bandmates eventually came to resent him, for several reasons. Firstly, his distinct voice. Secondly, and most notably, his popularity with the opposite sex. Throughout the tour, it was clear that the audience, mainly young women, was not interested in the 3 other members of the Hoboken Four. His band members beat him senselessly for this. After a few months, Frank could no longer take the abuse and returned to Hoboken. Down, but not out, Frank hustled upon his return to his hometown, continuing his run of poorly paid or unpaid gigs throughout Jersey. But Frank knew that he would have to cross the Hudson if he were to truly make it. In the late 1930s, the music industry was booming in New York City, particularly in Tin Pan Alley. Frank began performing in the big city and watching other musical acts. He was particularly inspired by Billie Holiday, who sang with rich emotion and conviction. Frank realized at that point, you can't sing it if you can't understand it. Sinatra attended voice lessons around this time, which helped him sing from his diaphragm rather than his throat, improving his voice significantly. Still, breaking into the industry was difficult, and Frank struggled to find steady work. After his initial rejection from the rustic cabin in New Jersey, Dolly used her numerous connections to get him the job. It was a great opportunity. He was making $15 a week, which wasn't much, but the shows were often broadcast to New York City's WNEW station, providing exposure to musicians who performed there. Frank was an instant success at the establishment, particularly with women. While they may have come with other men, once Sinatra began singing, all eyes were on him. One female fan in particular caught Frank's eye. 25-year-old Toni, from Lodi, New Jersey, was married but legally separated when she met Frank one night at the rustic cabin. Toni recounted her first meeting with Frank in an interview with Kitty Kelley in 1983. As Frank performed, she sucked on a lemon from her drink. He teased her afterwards, claiming that she almost ruined his song. She quipped back, "I'm going to give you a lemon in your sour face." He asked her to dance and wanted to take her out for a date. The pair dated for months. However, Dolly did not approve of their romance. Dolly claimed that Toni was trash, as Lodi was a working-class town, and Dolly was intent on her son marrying into an upwardly mobile family. According to Toni's recollections in Kelley's unauthorized biography on Sinatra, when she picked up Frank for dates, Dolly confronted her, asking who she was waiting for. When she told her she was waiting for Frank, Dolly said, "You are after his money and you're nothing but cheap trash from Lodi." Toni also said Dolly would berate her son as soon as he got into the car, telling him he brought home bad girls and that he should quit singing and go to college. Frank and Toni often went to hotels and registered under the name Mr. and Mrs. Sinatra. After they dated for a while, Toni's parents invited the Sinatras to their home to have dinner, which she recounted in her interview with Kelley. When Frank told his mother, she yelled, "What do you mean I have to go down there?" She claimed they were both too young to date, even though they were both in their 20s. When they had dinner at Toni's parents' home, Dolly made it as awkward as possible, asking Toni's father if he felt they were too young to be dating, and outright saying she did not want her son to be with Toni because it would ruin his career. Frank was embarrassed and told his mother she was making Toni's parents feel bad. When dessert was served, Dolly claimed she was on a diet. She did not thank Toni's family for dinner or invite them to Hoboken following this meeting. Frank advised Toni not to take it personally. "It's not just you. It's any girl I go with. No matter who the girl is, my mother always has something to say." In the summer of 1938, Frank proposed to Toni, giving her a small diamond ring. She accepted, and they planned to marry after she obtained a divorce. All the while, Frank was still seeing Nancy. He saw each woman on separate nights. Toni got pregnant around this time, and Frank said he would marry her. However, Dolly insisted that he end it. Toni was constantly worried that Frank would leave her because of his mother. She believed this anxiety caused her to lose the pregnancy in its 3rd month. After the miscarriage, Frank still promised to marry Toni. However, Dolly continued to chip away at his resolve, and it seemed Sinatra had ghosted Toni. She was determined to get answers. On the evening of November 25th, 1938, the day after Thanksgiving, Sinatra had just finished a performance at the Rustic Cabin and sat in a booth with Nancy. A server came by and informed him that he had a phone call. The man had an odd expression on his face. This seemed to tip Nancy off that something was amiss. She snatched the receiver before Frank could. He knew he was in deep trouble. According to James Kaplan's biography on Sinatra, Nancy, upon hearing a female voice, asked, "He's my boyfriend, and I want to know why you want to talk to him." Nancy then promised to pull her hair out by the roots if she ever caught Toni with Frank again. Frank covered his eyes throughout the entirety of the phone call. Nancy cried when she hung up the phone. Things were about to get worse. Toni got in her car and drove to Englewood Cliffs to confront Frank in person. When she arrived and he saw her, he attempted to go in the opposite direction, but Toni cornered him. Nancy soon came to Frank's aid, and the alleged conflict escalated quickly. According to Kitty Kelley's biography, Nancy asked, "What is this, another whore?" Toni threatened to hit her if she didn't back off. The women got physical, leading to Toni tearing Nancy's white dress. "Is this necessary?" Frank finally spoke up. He and several busboys broke up the fight. Toni told Frank that if he didn't want to see her anymore, he should have told her so. Frank insisted that he did want to see her. Nancy protested. Finally, he and Nancy spoke alone, and he informed her that Nancy was pregnant and that he had to marry her. This, however, may have been a lie intended to get Toni to move on, given that Nancy and Frank's first child, Nancy Jr., was not born until June of 1940. He also blamed his mother for the end of the relationship. There was no way Dolly would ever approve of Toni. To save face with Nancy, he claimed that he had only flirted with Toni and that she could not let it go. It seems that Nancy believed this version of events, and she stood by Sinatra. Toni left the rustic cabin humiliated. The following evening, Frank had just finished his midnight performance when he was arrested. As the crowd awkwardly applauded, Sinatra insisted it was a misunderstanding, a case of mistaken identity. This was not convincing, however, and Frank was taken to the sheriff's office and charged with seduction. The arrest warrant read, "Being then and there a single man over the age of 18 years, under the promise of marriage, did then and there have sexual intercourse with the said complainant, who was then and there a single female of good repute for chastity, whereby she became pregnant." Starting in 1848, women could charge men with seduction when they felt their reputations had been ruined by a physical encounter. This was based on a law written in England and replicated in the United States. Married, middle-aged women advocated the creation of these laws to protect young, unmarried women, many of whom were moving to cities alone for work. The law entailed identifying the seducer and the seduced, and gave the victim legal recourse if they were manipulated by a male. According to one Iowa court, the seduced party had to be previously of chaste character, that she has yet preserved that priceless jewel that is the particular badge of the virtuous unmarried female. So-called fallen women were not eligible to sue for such damages, and there were age restrictions. In some cases, women won thousands of dollars in compensation from their seducers. Seduction was defined as the use of arts, persuasions, or wiles to overcome the resistance of the female who is not disposed, of her volition, to step aside from the path of virtue. Any seductive arts or promises, whereby the female involuntarily and reluctantly yields thereto, are sufficient. In some cases, men could serve major jail time for this offense, but often avoided this fate by marrying the women they seduced. When Frank was given his one phone call from jail, he of course called his mother, who confidently told him she would have him out within an hour. Despite this, Dolly could not get her son out of jail, and instead pleaded with Toni to withdraw the charges. She insisted that if Toni truly cared about Frank, she would not have done this. Toni refused. She was angry and realized she had been played the fool. Then, Marty Sinatra, pathetic as can be, arrived on her parents' doorstep. Toni recalled in the interview that he looked like a hobo at the door begging for something to eat. Her father felt so bad for him he offered him a drink. Marty asked Toni to get Frank out of jail. After they talked for a few hours, Toni agreed and headed to Hackensack to withdraw the charges. When she arrived, according to her, Frank was sobbing. She promised to drop the case under the condition that both he and Dolly apologized for the things they did and said to her. He agreed, Toni withdrew the charges, and he was released from jail, according to Toni. Other sources say that the police dropped the seduction charges after discovering that Toni was already married. This was not the end of the story, however. 3 weeks went by, and neither Frank nor his mother had apologized to Toni. This time, Toni confronted Dolly, who she believed poisoned the well and ultimately destroyed her and Frank's relationship. The alleged confrontation quickly devolved into a screaming match, one that drew neighbors out of their homes and into the street to watch and listen. It became so heated that Dolly grabbed Toni, threw her into the cellar, and locked her in. The police were called, and Dolly told them, "She's running with my son, and I don't like it. She caused a big disturbance here, and I want her arrested like she arrested my son." Given Dolly's influence in Hoboken, the cops did as they were told, and Toni was charged with disorderly conduct. Then, on the evening of December 22nd, Frank had just finished another performance at the rustic cabin when the police told him they had a gift from a fan of his. Frank walked over to retrieve it. It turned out to be another warrant for his arrest, this time for adultery. Toni was unwilling to back down. He and his mother had totally humiliated her, and it seems she wanted revenge. So she went back to the police the day after her fight with Dolly and charged Frank with adultery. Since she was technically still married, it was considered a crime, even though she was legally separated from her husband. However, she decided not to go through with the charges after speaking with her grandfather. He had seen Dolly's arrest record. She had been arrested numerous times for performing abortions. He told her to back down, that Frank was not worth it. How bad do you need a boyfriend to have one with a mother who kills babies? Given the way many people, especially Italian American Catholics, felt about abortion during this era, this was enough for Toni to drop the charges and move on with her life. The case was officially dismissed in January of 1939. After the seduction debacle, Dolly insisted that Frank marry Nancy. She was a good girl from a good family. Plus, Dolly knew she could remain in the driver's seat of Frank's life if he married a sweet, agreeable girl like Nancy. As his music career advanced, Dolly knew there would be more temptation where that came from. She did not want her son to fall into the clutches of women who she deemed bad girls. Frank did as he was told and married Nancy on February 4th, 1939, in Jersey City. Unfortunately for Nancy, matrimony did not curb Frank's philandering, and their marriage eventually ended after he fell in love with Ava Gardner, which I will be covering in a future video. Nevertheless, Nancy remained a confidant to Frank until his death in 1998. He sometimes visited her for a home-cooked meal years after their marriage ended. As for Toni, the scandal had a lasting impact on her life, but she didn't have any ill will against Frank when she was interviewed about the affair nearly 50 years later in 1983. "It took me 14 years to get married again after Frank. I don't hate him for what he did to me. He was in a hole at the time, and he had to do what his mother said. It was really her fault. She ran his life." Toni passed away in Lodi, New Jersey in 1986 at the age of 74. Sinatra's mugshot captures a young man who seems satisfied with himself, who knows he is a playboy and a Casanova, and is proud of it. Based on the fact that his behavior did not change and worsened after he became famous, this incident would not curb Frank's addiction to female attention. The mugshot makes him look like a dreamy outlaw. The story behind it, however, paints a picture of an up-and-coming yet arrogant young man who played with the emotions of two young women, one of whom would soon become his wife. Seduction and adultery were decriminalized in the state of New Jersey in the late 1970s. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and join me next time as we explore another affair from history.